Hello, everybody. Should we get started or what? Yeah, okay, let's do this. Welcome to our session on diversity as a competitive advantage. Hi, I'm Duretti Hirpa. I'm going to be your moderator here today. I'm a senior engineer at Slack, and I also sit on Slack's Diversity and Inclusion Council. We have three wonderful leaders here today to talk to us about how companies can build diverse and inclusive teams and how this is going to work to your benefit from a business perspective. Before I introduce everybody properly, I'm just going to set a little bit of context before we get started. Okay, so the US is changing. The population that we refer to as minorities in a generation won't be. According to the New York Times, the census calculates that by 2042, Americans who identify as Hispanic, Black, Asian, Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, together that group will outnumber non-Hispanic whites. So what does that mean for your business? In my opinion, only good things. First Round Capital recently released some information about their funds, and for the last 10 years, their women-led teams have outperformed their male-led teams at a rate of like 63%. This is a slide from McKinsey, and they show that gender-diverse companies outperform their non-gender balanced by a rate of 15%. And this percentage only goes up when you look at ethnically diverse teams. They outperform at a rate of 35%. So further in the McKinsey study, this is from the Why Diversity Matters study they put out in 2016, they found that diversity is a competitive advantage. And given changing populations in the US, now is the time where it's an unfair advantage, not in a generation where it'll be the status quo. So taking that into mind, companies still struggle with building and investing in diverse and inclusive workplaces. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So cool, let's introduce our lovely panel. I remain Duretti. Hello, I'm going to be your moderator. Jimena Almendares is sitting here. She is a VP business leader for payments at Intuit. She's got 15 years of experience leading product, design, growth, analytics, marketing, engineering, and business development teams. You've got so much experience, look at you. Previously, she was OkCupid's chief product officer and one of 2 C-level executives heading the company through its IPO. She's worked in 16 countries across North America, Latin America, Europe, and Asia, and often speaks about technology, women leadership, and diversity. Arlan, all the way over here, is the founder and managing partner at Backstage Capital, a seed investment firm that backs overachieving, underrepresented startup founders. She's dedicated to minimizing the funding disparities in tech by investing in high-potential founders who are of color, women, and or LGBT. Last but not least, here in the center, we have Nicole Sanchez. She is the founder and CEO of Vaya Consulting, a firm that's focused on working with companies to make more inclusive workplaces that can attract and retain diverse talent. She also lectures at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. She teaches a course called Diversity in the Workplace every spring to MBA students. Previously, Nicole was VP of Social Impact at GitHub and led a wide range of people-focused initiatives. Cool. Oh, no, that's too far. We're not done yet. So cool. Now that we've met our panel, let's get started. Let me put this down. So kind of as an opener question that everybody can take a look at, diversity and inclusion is kind of a large, thorny problem, and while there has been sustained focus on it, I think in the tech sector for the last 5 years, it hasn't really yielded any significant results. Why do you think that is, and like what part of this problem are you trying to attack and solve?
So I think the problem about diversity is when we all think that we're doing fine. Very recently at Intuit, we launched some results where we were like, oh, we're doing so much better than other tech companies. And actually a really senior executive said, you know, it's someone else's problem. And actually a woman had to say, well, we still have a problem. Like our numbers could be better, but we could not settle to say we're better than others, hence there is no problem. And most importantly, when I think about, we will talk about building products a little bit later, but when I think about the benefits, when I see people thinking about diversity, and one thing that I would love to talk about diversity is not just race, it could be background, it could be socioeconomical background. Like when we talk about it at Intuit, about building products, sometimes you think that people have a certain fluidity in terms of being able to pay their bills, but actually assumptions that we have about people, whether they have a precarious situation or not, we actually have been uncovering that actually there's a big difference of how do we think about an invoicing product versus someone that actually cannot pay their bills and hence cannot even start to work because they cannot buy tools. So when we talk about diversity, I would love for us to just be very broad about what diversity means, and it's just not the color of your skin, your sexuality, your orientation. It's also where did you grow up? Did you have the means to actually succeed?
Yeah, that's great. Nicole, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I actually use a definition of diversity pretty widely because I find that there are as many definitions of diversity as there are people in the room, which makes sense because that's what diversity is. But when we talk about diversity in tech, we're specifically talking about people from backgrounds that are underrepresented in tech, but have a disproportionate predictive ability to tell you how long someone's going to live, how much money they're going to earn over the course of a lifetime, how much education they're going to achieve, where they likely live, what they'll likely die of. Demographics actually can predict those things now with great accuracy. And so one of the things I don't want us to do in tech is shy away from those things that, you'll often hear leaders say things like, oh, but I realize that everybody in this room appears white, but we have great diversity of thought. And you go, well, yeah, of course you do. Anytime you put two people in a room together, you've got diversity of thought. You're not going to get two people who think the same things about anything. And so I do really want tech leaders to dig into race, socioeconomic class, gender, geography, languages spoken, religion, these things that we can't really change about ourselves, but still have a disproportionate impact on what our lives are going to be like. And tech has the same problem that the rest of the world has in that we have segregated ourselves very efficiently. And when we do that, we lose a whole bunch of perspectives from the human experience that need to be brought to bear on the product. So this is one of the things that's been really, I've been working on diversity in tech since 1999. So even though we've seen, it as a conversation for the last 5 years, imagine for the first, 17, everybody just thinks that you're nuts. But what we're losing is the ability to actually bring that lived experience to bear on products. Mm-hmm. And until these kinds of experiences are embedded in products, no matter what you're working on, companies will fall behind as demographics shift. This is just a fact. Whether you make cars, whether you make software, whether you make, some household item, you will lose in the future if this isn't central to how you're looking at developing your products.
I feel extremely under. What is the word? Yeah, I can't think of the word. I don't think I can name 16 countries, let alone have worked in 16 countries. So I'm on the investment side of things, and just kind of briefly, we invest in underrepresented, underestimated founders. So I don't really think about D&I a lot, believe it or not. I wake up and I try to get more capital to our founders, but I think what I've noticed, just as an outsider, someone who is very new to Silicon Valley and very new to this world, is that I think that, and I'm speaking for people, so I could be wrong, but I think that there's so much talk about D&I that maybe straight white males feel like they just don't want to talk about it anymore. It's just they kind of shut down because they think it's one thing. Mm-hmm. It's very specific, and I think maybe it's about there's always that subject in high school that you don't love, but there's that cool teacher that can make that make that subject more appealing. Right. I think maybe because the majority of people here that make decisions are white men, and some of my best friends are as well. Maybe I think maybe there could be a way to talk to them, and I want to just say a blanket. You're not all the same, but you know what I mean. Maybe there's a way to talk to them that where they understand that to us they're not the enemy. We just want them to understand us.
Yeah.
And in return, we have been, when I say we, I mean women, I mean people of color, I mean gay folk. We are bombarded with your life, with your story, with your representation, in every way. On media, when you walk down the street, you're represented in billboards. But I think getting that across could be really interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I am curious. I mean, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, Arlan. So I think you're approaching things in a really interesting way because your fund backs people of color, women, some underestimated folks, as you said, and it is the differentiator for your fund, right? So like that, you're kind of staking your company on this is your competitive advantage. This is
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're banking on it.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of access to a lot of deal flow all across the Bay Area, all across the country and the world. And that's not, I'm not going to drop the mic, but it's just true, but I've chosen this very outright to invest in people who have been underestimated for most of their lives in most situations. Right. Because I was an outsider and I just looked in and I said, I don't know much, but I know that if I were investing someone else's money, which I am now, I'd want to invest in people who have a chip on their shoulder a little bit, have something to prove. And so that's where I started, and it started as a thesis 3 years ago, and today we're at 50 companies after seeing 2,000 plus, and the fact that they exist, the fact that I remember reading like 3 years ago when I was living in Houston. I remember reading articles or maybe emails to me saying, how are you going to find the deal flow for that if you only invest in women? Yeah. And I was like, have you ever walked outside before? Like, there's a lot of us. I mean, So we're able to start proving it out that they exist, and representation is so paramount to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderfully put. I do kind of want to talk a little bit more about the idea that once people are you've seen them, they're out here, you get them in the door, what can we do to support people? Maybe this might be one for Nicole, because you've worked in-house and in the consulting way.
So presumably you mean once you've actually started diversifying your company. I have a few thoughts on that. First of all is that it's never too early to start. One of the myths that's out there is that, we'll raise our first round, we'll get our founding team in order and maybe some leadership, and then we'll worry about that. It's too late. You're going to end up spending a lot more money and have a lot of heartache later on if you wait. The minute you have an idea about a product that you might want to take that step out into entrepreneurship with is the minute you should start thinking about how you can get perspectives unlike your own into the company and into the product. So that's number one. Number two, that's not how most companies in Silicon Valley have done it. So I've often, and I still do, work with companies who hit that wall and they realize, oops, we really should have been thinking about this. And the oops comes from a few different places. I think it's no secret that there are oopses that come from very public shaming, right? And somebody leaves and writes an article and says, let me tell you about what it was like inside that company. And nothing will light a fire under a CEO's ass about diversity faster than that. I think that's okay, but it's not sustainable. And we can already see that trend kind of petering out as a way to call companies to the carpet. I think it's important. I think everybody deserves to tell their story. I don't think it's the most impactful way to move the needle on diversity and inclusion in tech. So now what we're seeing is what my firm is seeing is companies who don't ever want to get to that point. And they say, we realize now that we're lacking things. And we're missing huge parts of our customer base, and we're missing talent, and we're missing perspective in our marketing because we haven't invested in bringing people in who are unlike our founding team or unlike our first 100 employees or whatever it is. And so there is the bringing in, but then there is the keeping, which is just as important, because you can build inclusive culture with a homogenous group of people and everybody feels great about being there. You can bring diversity in and build no inclusive culture, and you'll have it for about 6 to 12 months and people start quitting. And so the big things you have to do, well, you have to do both at the same time, really is what you need to do. And if you think about diversity and inclusion as a bicycle, one pedal is diversity, the other pedal is inclusion, right? And there's an engineer named Emily Nakashima who has this great visual image that she gave me years ago, that if you pedal too far on one side, you fall. If you pedal too far on the other side, you also fall. So both things have to happen at the same time. Bring in diversity, build inclusive culture. Bring in more diversity, keep building inclusive culture. And part of why I love Slack, just to bring it like right back to this conference, is that I think Slack is a great tool for building inclusive culture. Nobody asked me to say that, but I really believe that if, for example, I have a CTO who lives in New York. He doesn't need to live in San Francisco. He has lived here, he doesn't like it. He's not happy here, why do I want him here? I don't want him here. I want him where he's happy, in Brooklyn. Slack keeps us, right, having very transparent company-wide conversations all the time, so then I'm not losing him over the course of time where he feels left out, right? That's not even explicitly about diversity except for geographic diversity. I'm able to talk to several people in my company at once transparently so people can say, oh, Nicole's talking to the CTO about that thing right now. I kind of want to listen in.
Right.
This is interesting, right? And that's a huge, investing in Slack in your company is a great tool for building inclusive communication. It's also very egalitarian, right? And there are other tools like that that are out there, not as great as Slack. But if you're not thinking about how you're going to retain the diverse talent that you bring in, it doesn't matter how many black or brown people, how many LGBTQ people, how many women from any background you bring in, you will lose them in 6 to 12 months. And you need to know that the cost of losing somebody in the companies that we're talking about starts at about $20,000. So every time you have turnover, a rank and file individual contributor is going to cost your company at least $20,000 to replace them. So there's just real business metrics around building inclusive culture and making sure people want to stay and bring their best self to your company.
Absolutely. Arlan, you look like you're about to say
I
something.
have something to say. It's add on to that.
Yeah.
And it's scientifically proven, but it's probably not gonna make much sense. The Mighty Ducks.
Like the...
You've seen the Mighty Ducks, right? I want to go back a little bit to if you are and I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but if you're a 30-year-old white man here listening or, laughing later online, and you're wondering, okay, this is interesting, and I know what to do once they're in, that's great, but why do I necessarily need to worry about it at all, right? So you guys can talk a lot more about this than I can, but start with the image of the Mighty Ducks. They were okay at the beginning, but then they went down and got some black people, right? Am I not right? Okay. They got diversity involved, and they couldn't be beat. They couldn't be beat. Yes. And I think I'm happy to talk about it afterwards when I, go deeper into that. But that's how you can just start the conversation. And I just thought of that while I was sitting here, so I apologize.
I really hope some white guy goes up to some person of color in line and is like, you ever seen the Mighty Ducks? You want to come be an engineer at my company?
You can look at it like, I don't know much about sports, but if you look at it like recruiting, you don't sit in one spot, you don't pull from the exact same high school, and that's something I've heard, you don't go to the same spot. You look for people with different strengths, and that is why. It's like that question I hear so much with other investors and angel investors and institutional investors, bringing it back, it's like, okay, this is interesting, and you've convinced me that it's not just a social issue, but what does it matter to me if it bumps it up, by 20%, bumps up the bottom line, and you can start with the Mighty Ducks. We'll go from there.
And one thing even that if you're thinking, I'm super cool with diversity, I don't have any problems, but there are things and tools that you can use to amplify diversity. So one of the things that we try to do at Intuit is that, say, someone says something, and then the conversation drifts, and then someone else, usually it could be a guy that says it with much more authority, and then people lean towards that. You could go back and say, like building on that idea that Monica said, and she had that, as she stated it at the beginning, or even when people cut someone off, one thing that we're trying to say is like, I hear your point, but I think that Monica wanted to say something. Monica, what was your point? So there's so many ways in which we can actually play, and right now perhaps the numbers are not great, but we can amplify. And the other one is never assume that people have the same circumstances than you do. What often happens when kids that come from underprivileged backgrounds go to college is that they might actually have to have 2 jobs to actually pay tuition. They might have to finish school, then go work, and they don't have time to actually do homework. So now think about what's happening at your companies, perhaps people that are starting out, you have a more diverse background, but then they actually have to pay for their families. They might actually have had kids earlier. So think about how you're viewing people and how do you assess talent. Are you taking into account the fact that people might have other things behind the scenes that you're not seeing because you did not grow up in a similar circumstance?
Yeah, I really like that. I think there was an article that the Obama administration, they did a lot of like amplifying of each other so that their voices were still heard. That's really wonderful. I know that Nicole talked a little bit about like products that are good for kind of maintaining diverse and inclusive teams. I'm very gratified working at Slack. But you've worked a lot in kind of product organizations. Have you seen the benefit of having a diverse set of people, inclusive environment that has helped you in your time building products?
Sure. I actually have a pretty good story that matches revenue and growth and actually doing something good. So when I joined OkCupid, a few months later, the CEO basically said, I'm leaving, and we knew that the IPO for Match Tinder OkCupid was coming. So we had basically a year to increase revenue, increase growth, and just head to the IPO. And at the same time, there was actually a set of people in the company, LGBT users, that were saying, you know what, we only have basically male and female, and we only have gay, bisexual, straight possibilities. That doesn't look like a reality, and especially when you're thinking about dating, words really matter. And to be able to tag yourself as you self-identify so that you can find your life partner seems really important. So it was one of those moments when I was like, yes, but IPO, we don't have the time. And the worst thing is that I can talk a little bit more in terms of coding. The engineers many years ago had coded everything binary, male or female. So the code did not even allow, it was like either 0 or 1. It did not allow for like 21 different sets of users. But I also thought that given my background, it was one of those times that where you're like, it's almost like a movie. There's a bit of the sound, and you need to talk with yourself and be like, what type of human am I? And I was like, there's no reason why I can prioritize revenue and not the right thing. So it turns out that because people within the company were so engaged, we had a set of engineers that figured out how to basically hack this. We had another set of UX specialists that were also thinking about how to simplify the experience. Because from a business perspective, we knew that not many users were actually going to use the different types of new genders that we had. And we didn't want to alienate, in that sense, a straight population, but we didn't actually want to treat it differently. So the summary of the story is that a few months afterwards, we were one of the largest social networks to actually launch 22 genders and 13 orientations. And we still went through the IPO. It was still successful. But I think that was the moment when you actually, as an executive or as a person in a team, can say, this really matters. We actually can do it.
That's wonderful. And you didn't have to like sacrifice anything to do what was the right thing for your business. That's awesome. Cool. I wanted to talk a little bit about, maybe this is one more for Nicole, but what have you seen that when you come to a company and you're like, okay, like we understand that it's not just a moral imperative, that it's good for our business, but we've only hired, say, one person tucked away, like in an HR function that's like maybe very junior. How do you kind of convince companies to invest a little bit more in this thing, in diversity and inclusion?
Well, the good news about us having now some public data behind us for the last 3 to 5 years is that companies are now coming up against the realization that what they've tried hasn't worked very well. And this is the model that most companies use. There's one person buried deep inside HR who showed an interest in diversity. She's probably young. She's probably white. This is probably one of her first professional gigs. And somebody said, oh, you care about diversity? Okay, you go over there and you do our diversity programming. And she's sitting there going, I guess I'm supposed to find a trainer. I guess I'm supposed to work with recruitment and try and bring some new kinds of people in here. And it's just this enormous uphill battle in a company that may be anywhere from 100 to 15,000. I've not seen much difference, much variation in how people structure their diversity and inclusion work inside the company from an organizational standpoint. She's going to fail. She might have a few wins. She's going to get very frustrated, and she's going to leave, or she's going to say the company doesn't actually care about this. So one of the first things that we do as a consulting firm is go into the company, and one of my litmus tests, just to be honest, is whoever called and said, hey, can we set up a meeting? We want to know about what you do. I say, when can I talk to your CEO? And their response tells me a lot of what I need to know. Because I've worked with clients who say, oh, that's never going to happen. And I go, I'm probably not the consultant for you. Not because my ego needs to be, I need to sit in front of the CEO, but the companies who say, oh yeah, they're right over there. They would love to talk to you. We told them you were coming in today. I go, okay, well now you've got something good going on here such that the leader of your company is demonstrating an interest. If you are going to bury diversity deep inside HR in your company, I'm just telling you right now, it's a recipe for you to be able to point to a thing and say, look, we checked the boxes. Everybody got implicit bias training, yay, but nothing's going to fundamentally change in your company. And that, I'm excited we're moving away from. People are understanding it's not an HR function. It's actually a business function that can be integrated with everything from product design and marketing to your finances. I mean, this is just like a small anecdotal thing, but look at your reimbursement policies in your companies, what you were talking about before around socioeconomic backgrounds. If your reimbursement, your travel policy says that employees need to put a whole bunch of money out of their pockets on behalf of the company and then they get paid back, you've got a problem. You probably have a diversity and inclusion problem in your finance org. And so until you can get your diversity and inclusion work to inform the work of every other business function, it's going to be very difficult for you to move the needle on everything from who you hire and retain to how you're going to attract the best talent in the world. And the other not so well-kept secret is that communities of color, in particular in Silicon Valley, we talk to each other. We know which companies not to go to because our friends, our family members have been there and have said, I already heard about all that.
They say it just like that.
And they do. I can give you a list right now of companies I will never, ever work with because of the horror stories that have come out of it. I'm not going to go tweet about it, but I'll tell you what, if they call me and like, oh, we understand you're a consultant, I'm going to have a lot of vetting to do before I sign that contract. We talk to each other. Slack has a great reputation. It has a great reputation, especially among Black engineers. That's just a known fact. Twilio has a great reputation. Twilio has a great reputation for hiring and retaining people of color. These are things that you need to know and ask your friends. And if you don't have a friend you can ask, you probably need to make a friend that you can ask. And I would make that your first point. Start with the Mighty Ducks. I don't know if that answered your question, but that is how we approach it. You can learn a lot before you ever get hired into a company about where they are with their efforts.
Absolutely. We've got only a couple more minutes left, and I want to make sure that there's time for Q&A if there's some questions burning in people's hearts. But I think as kind of like a closer, do you feel like there's like one thing that you would want people to know that they could take back to their companies today that like they can implement? Maybe that's a big ask. Maybe it's nothing.
Hire Vaya Consulting. We can help.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say, from the investor point of view, if you are a founder or on the executive team of a company, which I'm sure a lot of people here are, another way to look at it that doesn't involve hockey, adolescent hockey, is that if you're going out to raise anytime in the next 2 years, it's going to be kind of interesting because investors are actually going to catch up to us as Backstage, to my fund. They're going to catch up if for whatever reason. It may be for good reasons, genuine reasons, or it may just be because they need to raise from their investors. And so that, I'm talking about VCs. So they're going to start asking you about your diversity efforts. I would say somewhere around top of 2019. So start now, have it in place, and you'll have one more thing you can present to them for raising. It's just like a straightforward, honest thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and the other one would be, just as I was talking about amplifying, is that you might not right now have a very diverse team, but you do have customers that are very diverse. For instance, when we have built products, we can think about how would this look like from a colorblind perspective. And there are tools that allow you to even see if your designs are actually going to be seen by colorblind people. The other one is going on interviews. That's something that we've been doing a lot for Intuit, because we cannot pretend that we can be in the shoes of self-employed users and contractors and what are their problems. So we actually go to their homes and we understand and we hear it. We write down those quotes, and now we actually feel the pain. So I think that's a part that it's really important. A, how do you amplify, as we talked before? And the other one is how do you do not wait to have a diverse team? You go search diversity, even in your customers.
That's wonderful. Okay, so does anyone have, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? There's one person in the back, and there's a mic runner somewhere. Oh, and also, no comments, just questions. That'd be great.
So Nicole, you brought up a good point about diversity and inclusion being buried in HR. What's a good alternative that you've seen in your company or other companies that has worked, and where to posit it?
So I was very fortunate at GitHub, which is where I was before, to actually lead this from the executive team. I reported directly to the CEO. I had a team of 11 in a company of 700, which is kind of unheard of. And we were able to be a business function alongside sales, finance, engineering, product, etc. And that was the best model I've personally ever experienced, in part because I got to do it and I believe in it, but also because there was no, our work wasn't translated through a million different filters before we got the thumbs up or thumbs down from the CEO. And I got to actually be part of the executive team and talk about initiatives around things like emerging markets and saying, well, we're not going to go into an emerging market like a colonial superpower, right, and extract everything from it. We're actually going to go in and use some of the diversity and inclusion rules that we had put in place for ourselves and say, for every time we're going into a new market, we are also investing in community efforts to increase the diversity of tech in that market, right? So if you were coming to San Francisco for the first time, it would be to sell your product and also let's invest in Code 2040 or Black Girls Code or something like that so that we can be part of the whole ecosystem that is trying to actually lift up and improve the tech sector. And so we got to do all the philanthropic giving as well, and community partnerships. My GitHub friends are here. My former GitHub friends are all here. Hi. It was great, right, guys? Thanks, Sarah.
I believe there was one more question.
You spoke a lot to diversity at like the leadership level, but what is a way that like more everyday employees can like exhibit that?
That's a cool question. I don't really have an answer, but it's a cool question. The first thing that comes to mind is like, I don't know what your role is or how many people are at your company, but I bet you anything the co-founders want to impress the hell out of you because they want to keep you. So if you talk to them, if you go through the channels or can talk directly to them and suggest it and get a couple other people too, they'll just a good set of co-founders will try to make it happen for you to keep you on board, and that's the power that you have. You have like for a day, I want to have that privilege. You have this privilege that you can spread far and wide, and the fact that you're asking that question is amazing to me.
And actually, for instance, the OkCupid initiative started by the teams. So it was teams that were not just LGBT employees, but also allies that were like, we actually really care about this happening, so we are going to enable it. So it was a set of engineers, a set of designers, and they all came with a proposal. And then we revised it, but I wouldn't have been able to do it had the team had not had a thought of, A, we care, and B, how can we solve it? So that's really important. Every single person here can A, amplify and think about how to improve diversity.
Oh, that's great. Are there any other questions? Okay, I see at least two. It's great. These questions, awesome, wonderful. Oh.
So this is a loaded question, so I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. A lot of times this topic, only because I know people who are on the other side of the fence, can feel alienating to them. What would you recommend as a way to approach those people so that they don't feel like this is a move against them or to prevent them from doing what they want to do?
Yeah, go for it.
I've spent a lot of time thinking this through and experimenting. Inclusion means inclusion. It means everybody. But it's okay that things are different for different people. And what I mean from that is equality and inclusion does not mean same. And one of the places where this shows up a lot is it's like, well, what are your diversity and inclusion efforts? And what I often want to ask is, for which community? Because every community you can name has a correlating intervention that should go along with it, including folks who are in the majority. Here's the other thing I've learned the hard way is there are some people we aren't going to convince. We're just not. And I think early in my career, I spent a lot of time focusing on those folks and being like, how can you not see why this is so important? Why are you acting like this is a zero-sum game and you're going to lose and I'm going to win? That's not what this is about. And I wasn't going to convince them. And that has to be okay. Because in sociological terms, all you have to move in a group of people is a third of them. You have to move a third of people in a specific direction, and then that creates a tipping point and a culture shift. And so this is how we look at it in our companies, is we go, look, let's map out everybody in the company and where they are on the spectrum of being on board for this and not. And the folks who aren't, as long as they are not, as long as you're still in a third of people who are like, yeah, we like this diversity and inclusion things, you can make this diversity and inclusion thing, you can make stuff happen. You don't even need half. And so I think the hard part to understand is when someone's actually willing to be open to what an intervention looks like for them, because that's a new thing, right? Like, I want to teach you, wealthy white guy CEO, why some of what you're doing isn't right. It's been years since they heard something like that, right? Especially around management. And to come in and say, I want to teach you, I want to help you get better at this thing, their reaction means everything. If there's somebody who isn't going to come on board, if you're the CEO, it's going to be really hard. Deeper in the organization, bringing a third of the people along and saying, all right, so how's this making you feel? What do you think about all this talk of race and class and gender and socioeconomics? Let's get there and allow people to ask beginner questions. This is the big thing that I do now, especially in executive coaching, is I do one-on-one coaching with tech leaders, many of whom are white men, and we create a safe space for them to ask a question that they would never be able to ask in public, lest it be tweeted by everybody in the room, right? And so I sign my NDA, and I say, all right, you need to get better at this, right? You need to just be able to talk about race. You need to be able to say black without blushing, right? I mean that's how tactical it gets. What?
It's not a cuss word.
No, it's not a cuss word. You have the permission to say black, African, American, black, what do I? And I'm like, it's all right. We're going to practice. And when you create the space for them to work out their own stuff, either at leadership or as individual contributors, you will be able to convince more people to move a culture in a specific direction. You have to create that space. That doesn't mean, sorry, I know I'm going on.
That's okay.
That doesn't mean that every person of color around you or everybody from an underrepresented background owes it to you to educate you about where we're going. But you have to create those spaces. If you don't create them for including the straight white guys in your company to work this stuff out, you're not going to get very far. And I think the big revelation I had, especially when I was at GitHub, is starting to hear from engineers who were sort of from traditional backgrounds when they'd say to me things like, you're not as scary as I thought you'd be. Right? That's my tagline. That's my brand tagline. Nicole Sanchez, not as scary as you thought, as you heard. And to get that from them and to go, oh, you didn't laugh at me, you didn't shame me, you didn't tweet about it later on, you just told me this is what's going on. If you can't do that and your D&I leadership isn't doing that, you're not going to get very far. Yeah.
One important point, though, about diversity is that when we really are very diverse about the meaning of diversity, we'll find out that we all fall into diversity for many different reasons. So it could be perhaps you work in tech and you don't have a CS background. Perhaps you learned coding through a boot camp. Perhaps you didn't go to an Ivy League school. Perhaps your parents, you grew up in a rural area and didn't have access to certain things that other people did. So I think that when we stop saying that it's about being straight or white, then we can all understand that it could be handicaps, and that life changes, and hence in one time or the other, we will actually be diverse too, versus another set of people.
Just a quick note for the person that asked. Also, one more thing. The same way that I ask, the people that you're talking about who would be alienated, the same way that I call on them to ask a woman what they're thinking and what they're feeling, what they're needing, ask a person of color. I think we can, we, black women, gay people, of people of color, I think you can also ask the alienated people what they want. Like, what do you want from this? And I mean, that's tricky for me to say in particular, but it's true. It's kind of like, it's okay if you get to have a part in this, and it's not 100% us telling you how it's going to happen. I think that could go a long way.
I think we are right out of time, but
Peace.
I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.